Hey everyone, welcome to episode 14 of the cartoon Flashback. Now I know it's been about over a month since I did the last one, which was Secret Adventures, and I apologize for not doing it last month. But I'm going to make it up to you by reviewing two cartoon series that we're going to flash back on. Now, one of the cartoon series I'm going to review did come out this past decade. So it probably isn't as old as you think it is, but it is good to look back on it. Well, another one came out about 20 years ago. What's the one that, 20 years ago. Now, what's the one I'm talking about that came out 20 years ago? Well, let's start out with it, and I'll show you. The one I'm talking about is Tiny Toon Adventures. This show ran for, I think, about 3 to 4 seasons on Fox Kids and the WB. Originally, the pilot for Tiny Toon Adventures, which was A Looney Beginning, aired as a primetime special on a Friday evening back in 1990 on CBS. That's right. Basically, I think about a month or so before it made its debut in syndication, aka on Fox Kids. Actually, it would end up on Fox Kids about a year later, or a few months later. Tiny Toon Adventures made their debut on CBS. Now, first, someone would think, Tiny Toons is going to be on CBS Saturday morning. Perhaps that was the original plan. I don't know. But the pilot was aired in primetime on the CBS network on a Friday evening. I remember because I watched it, like many fans did. But Tiny Toon Adventures is actually the first animated cartoon series that Steven Spielberg ever made. That's right, Steven Spielberg. And why is it the first one? It went on to inspire some other ones. If you look at my previous cartoon flashback in episode 12, I believe, you see I talked about Animaniacs, which was Steven Spielberg's second venture into animated cartoon series. This, however, was his first one. Now, believe it or not, the history of Tiny Toon Adventures is really, really huge. Or it's really, really complicated. I mean, in fact, here on the DVD, you have a feature called From Looney Tunes to Tiny Toons. And one of the things they talk about with Tiny Toons here is the fact that originally Tiny Toons was going to be introduced as a feature-length film. That's right, a feature-length film. But that did not happen. Instead, the decision was made to bring it in as an animated series. Now, Tiny Toon Adventures went above and beyond any cartoon series that you've ever seen at the time. I mean, the gags and stuff were aimed not just at kids, but at adults as well. Like they talk about with, Animaniacs. The gags and jokes there were not just aimed at kids, but at adults as well. Same here, aimed at both demographics at times. Now, Tiny Toons is not without its faults, or without its controversy, I should say. In fact, one cartoon that they did, or in fact 2 cartoons that they did, were banned off television because the FCC and the parent board did not want them on. Basically, the episodes I'm talking about are, one episode is the cartoon short One Beer. Basically, it's Buster, Hampton, and Plucky doing, I guess you could say, their own version of what could happen if young teenagers or young kids get a hold of some beer and alcohol. In other words, if it's the first time, they can end up getting drunk, and, you'd have to see the episode to know what I mean, and I think you can find that here on YouTube. It's called One Beer. But you'll have to see it to know what I mean. Another cartoon that they banned off television later on was one of the variety episodes called Toons from the Crypt. In other words, it was a Tiny Toon parody, and I guess you could say nod, to HBO's Tales from the Crypt. Now, I don't know exactly what happened there, but I guess apparently the episode was deemed too violent or too scary for the kids. Now this, really makes you think, wait a minute, they've had some cartoon shorts in Tiny Toons that were scary before. Perhaps. But I guess this one was deemed way too scary and way too controversial. But, again, Tiny Toons was not without those kind of faults or controversies at all. Now, Tiny Toons was popular enough that a year after its debut, a movie was released directly to video called Tiny Toon Adventures How I Spent My Vacation. Now, Tiny Toons How I Spent My Vacation, believe it or not, and I mentioned this in a review about the movie, you can see on this channel, but Tiny Toon Adventures was originally, How I Spent My Vacation, was originally supposed to be released in theaters. That did not happen. Instead, the decision was made to release it on directly to VHS. Now, one would think, why would they do that? Well, apparently, I guess they feel as though the animation probably wasn't deemed good enough, or the story was too silly enough, or something. I don't really know. I don't really know, but they had the reasons for it. And How I Spent My Vacation was also separated into basically a 4-part miniseries later on in syndication. Now, Tiny Toons would also bring out some other specials as well. One special they brought out was It's a Wonderful Tiny Toon Christmas, which was basically a play, and I guess you could say an homage, if you will, to It's a Wonderful Life. Sorry, that's my dog. She's barking at somebody outside the window. That's my dog. She's barking at somebody outside the window. I'm sorry about that. But basically, it was an homage to pay, I guess it was paying homage to It's a Wonderful Life, the Frank Capra movie. But anyway, that's what that one was. And then they also had one called Spring Break. Now this was basically a 1 hour version of what was dubbed at the time for the show the TTV. In other words, the Tiny Toons Music Television. It was basically Spring Break special was basically a 1 hour version of that, basically having the characters go on spring break to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and basically the subplot was the Tiny Toon cast was going on spring break vacation to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Elmira wanted to find out the true identity of the Easter Bunny, who she thought was Buster, and of course Plucky wants to sell his new invention, I guess he's made in school, for a profit, but ends up falling for a cute female duck, who we find out in the end has actually fallen for Hampton, believe it or not. So, anyway, those are some of the things that Tiny Toons did, from the movies that Tiny Toons, well, actually came out of Tiny Toons, I should say. Now, Tiny Toons did bring back, a few gags that had not been seen since Looney Tunes, or in the early portions of it. In fact, one gag that I personally like that Tiny Toons brought back was the melting gag. Now, the last time we saw the melting gag in any cartoon, as far as I'm concerned, was the 1956 Popeye cartoon, Polly Boo Woos, where at the end of it, you see olive oil melt into a running puddle of butter. They brought that gag back out in a couple of episodes. They brought it out right at the Looney Beginning. You can watch it there. I'm not going to give much away. They brought it out in Europe in 30 minutes when Babs melts into a puddle. In the Acme Bowl, in It's a Wonderful Tiny Toon Christmas, just to name a few. But that's what Tiny Toon Adventures did, and that is just the first of these 2 cartoons I'm going to review here in the Cartoon Flashback. But that is Tiny Toon Adventures altogether. It's a good show. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's on DVD now, Season 1 and 2. And when I come back with Part 2 of Episode 14, we're going to look at the cartoon that debuted this past decade.